What's up, basketball fans? Welcome to the Rats Report. It is time to talk about the Toronto Raptors because I strongly feel the Toronto Raptors are making the same mistake yet once again. I want you guys to be a little bit more open-minded and actually watch the video, not just react based off of the title or the first few seconds of the video. So we will be discussing various events which I believe will lead the Raptors to where they were just a few years back. So if you're ready to watch, make sure to hit the subscribe button. And with that being said, let's get into today's video. Now, as you guys know, I do like to give out shout outs on my channel, and the shout out for today's video goes out to 308 Carl. So I'm still recording this video on the same day as I've released my previous video, but you will be seeing this video on Saturday morning. But in terms of the Toronto Raptors, why do I feel like they made the same mistakes? Well, we have to go through a few events that have happened in the past and compare them to now to fully understand what I mean by this. Now, when you go back to several years back when the Toronto Raptors made a trade for Rudy Gay, and I am not comparing Rudy Gay to Brandon Ingram for the a lot of the audience viewing this, but there are a lot of similarities when we talk about the Toronto Raptors. So for the Raptors, when they traded for Rudy Gay, note the date that they traded, January 30th, 2013. They traded Rudy Gay from the Grizzlies in a six-player deal. And fast forward a little bit to when the Raptors hired Masai Ujiri, which was May 31st, 2013. So again, not a few months apart, which had a lot of people questioning why did the Toronto Raptors trade for Rudy Gay? It was simple. Brian Colangelo was on his way out from the Toronto Raptors and wanted to make a winning move. Now, what does that have to do with the Toronto Raptors presently and Masai Ujiri in particular? Well, take a look at this right here, and it says Roger and Bell have the option of buying out Tantabom, which we know I believe he's no longer part of the company in the summer of 2026, which is when Masai Ujiri's contract expires, according to Sportsnet. Again, this was being reported back in 2024, but we do know Masai Ujiri's contract comes off this in 2026, so he doesn't have a lot of time to build a winning championship team, which is something that he has constantly reiterated time and time again that the Raptors will win another championship under his belt. Now that Masai Ujiri is on his way out, there are a lot of similarities between when Brian Colangelo made that move on his way out and what this seems like Masai Ujiri could be doing on his way out as well. Now, for a lot of people saying, well, Brian Colangelo and Masai Ujiri are two different people, you're completely right, but don't forget Masai Ujiri also worked under Brian Colangelo at one point for the Toronto Raptors as well. Now, anyone that knows Scottie Barnes and Masai Ujiri's relationship knows that Masai Ujiri values Scottie Barnes so highly, and considering how quickly he accelerated into a great player and into an all-star player, it's no doubt that Raptors are trying to do, particularly Masai is trying to do everything in his power to see this team compete yet once again before he ultimately might just leave the team. Now, I know what people are going to say. Bobby Webster just came out today saying they are tanking, but when you take into consider some of the implications that I'm about to mention in a few minutes, and you take into consideration how that's going to impact the Raptors' future, you will fully understand exactly what I mean. Now, I want to go back to several years back where one thing I had constantly stated with the Toronto Raptors roster construction was they had too many chefs in the kitchen. So taking a look at this chart here several years back when the Raptors had drafted Scottie Barnes, they had him playing the center position between him and OG Anunoby. A few times Pascal Siakam, but this is essentially what a roster looked like several years back. Scottie Barnes, OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, Gary Trent Jr. Now, the flaw of this roster here was that the Raptors had too many chefs in the kitchen, meaning too many of these guys needed the ball in their hands to be effective and to take their own shots. When you are building a roster, it is very important to note that you have to have at least one or two players in the starting lineup that are role players that understand that two, three main guys will be taking majority of the shots, and the other two will kind of sit back and do what they need to do to help those other three succeed in the game. Now, with the Raptors here, the issue was Gary Trent chucked a lot of shots. So did Fred VanVleet. Pascal, Scottie both needed their shots as well. And unfortunately for OG Anunoby, he was kind of the fifth option in this lineup. Now, I don't want to say the Raptors are exactly in the same position, but fast forward to now what the starting lineup looks like for the Toronto Raptors. You have Jakob Poeltl, Scottie Barnes, you have Brandon Ingram, of course. You got RJ Barrett and Emmanuel quickly. Now, RJ Barrett is going to be playing the shooting guard position, which isn't bad because a lot of people are talking about the length and the size that the Toronto Raptors now have. Brandon Ingram is 6'8", 6'9". RJ Barrett will be playing the shooting guard position at 6'6", 6'7". And Emmanuel quickly himself is, I believe, 6'3" or 6'4". So In terms of size, sure, it gives them a lot of options, but size doesn't always equate to great defense. And this is what I mean by the Toronto Raptors once again having too many chefs in the kitchen. Jakob Poeltl understandably can play his role really well, but the issue tied in with this is Scotty and Brandon Ingram will be taking majority of the shots. Meanwhile, you're going to be tanking RJ's value a lot more because of the amount of field goal attempts we'll have will go down, which means that his stats will go down as well, his production will go down as well, and this will tie into what we're about to talk into next. But just overall, this roster does seem a little bit better constructed as compared to previous years where we talked about, Scotty, Pascal, OG, Fred, and Gary, because they had absolutely no bench. So yes, we'll give the Raptors the one benefit of the doubt that they have constructed the roster a lot better around this time, where they have Ochai, where they have Grady, excuse me, where they have guys like Jacoby Walter off of the bench as well. And of course, they're going to have their first round pick as well. But again, if the Raptors here with this current starting lineup are to draft, let's say Cooper Flag or Ace Bailey, this complicates things even furthermore and brings us way back to several years ago where we drafted Scotty Barnes. But in this case, when we do draft Cooper Flag, he'll be ready to come and play right away. And now all of a sudden, you're going to be hurting pride and egos, and you're going to be creating more locker room issues because one of Emmanuel Quickly and RJ Barrett are going to have to play off of the bench. And most importantly, you're going to be playing guys out of position yet once again. I know people are going to say, well, Brandon Ingram has played with Zion Williamson. He has played the small forward position, but just because a team has made that mistake shouldn't mean that you should do the same. Ideally, Brandon Ingram is not a small forward. He's also not a great defender as well. So the Raptors, I get why they traded for Brandon Ingram. Don't mistake in my lack of knowledge as to why the Raptors did this. If they weren't going to trade for Brandon Ingram, the alternate was going to be they traded Bruce Brown to take on bad salary and maybe a second round pick or two, and similar situation with Kelly. So the Raptors thought to themselves, if we're going to trade those two guys and simply just take on bad salary, why not just include our first round pick and get a more talented player as well, rather than just having a couple guys making 10, $15 million each. But now here's where the issue lies. The Raptors did give up an Indiana first round pick for next season. And I want to talk about this real quick here because when you look at the Indiana Pacers, currently they're slotted at 22nd. And you're probably asking me, why is that such a big deal? The Pacers are going to be great for next season as well, but they could potentially lose Miles Turner. But also, this is where it becomes an issue. People look at picks as just as a pick that might not be top 12, top 14, maybe out of the lottery. But when you look at some strong draft classes, and I want to use this as an example, this is the last draft class that the Toronto Raptors just this past year. When you look at some of these guys outside of the lottery, look at someone like Jarrett McCain, look at someone like Dalton Connect, look at someone like Tristan Da Silva, and even Yves Missy. And these are some of the players that went outside of the lottery, some of the places where the Indiana Pacers could potentially finish. So again, I know at the moment it may not look like a lot of these guys will be better than Brandon Ingram, and they probably won't be, but to be able to draft even just right outside the lottery is so great. And let's take a look at another draft class, which was considered very strong, which was Scotty Barnes' draft class. And again, you look at some of the guys drafted, Alperen Sengun, Trey Murphy, you look at Jalen Johnson, where he was drafted as well. So again, there's still a very high possibility that the Indiana Pacers next season, where the pick ends up landing, is just 16, 17, 18, which is a great place to be. Now, I know people are going to mention for all of the Alperen Senguns, the Trey Murphys, there's also Kai Jones, there's also Keon Johnson. But considering the Raptors' track record of how well they have drafted ever since Masai Ujiri has come on board, there's no doubt that the Raptors most likely hit on most of their picks rather than not. Now, the final point I'd like to make here, which is the biggest issue for me with acquiring Brandon Ingram, is the salary cap situation. So taking a look at this chart here, you'll see that the NBA salary cap for the 2025-2026 season is projected to be $154.6 million. This is a 10% increase from previous seasons, which is the maximum allowed by the collective bargaining agreement. The luxury tax threshold is also projected to be $187.9 million. So keeping in mind, to get into the luxury tax, you'll be at approximately $187.9 million. Do keep that number in mind, because now when we talk about the Ingram situation where, a lot of people think we're going to sign him for 37, $38 million. Just consider that Emmanuel Quickly just got paid $35 million. And I wanted to pull up this article from a few seasons ago where it said perhaps more shocking news to come out of the Ingram trade saga was the fact that he reportedly turned down $50 million contract extension. Now, it looks like the Pelicans can't even match a 36 million extension. When you think about the last couple of off seasons, Brandon Ingram turned down an extension of 50 million per year in 2023 and an extension of about 40 million from what I'm told this past offseason. And this, again, before people question the source, this is Shams Charania saying this. He said that I expected him to have a robust market between now and the deadline. It is tough to see if Brandon Ingram will ever receive an offer of $50 million year yet again. And he's likely won't ever be getting it from the Pelicans again. So again, forget the $50 million, but he also turned down a $40 million. Now you could make the argument that maybe perhaps Brandon Ingram did not wish to be with the Pelicans long term, but let's assume that the Raptors sign him to a $40 million contract. Again, I'm being generous because I think the contract number will be more of 42, $43 million. But just taking a look at this chart here, let's look at the Raptors' future salary cap situation here heading into next season. Because Brandon Ingram, let's assume that he's making 40 million a season, right? You got at that point 11 players under contract. Because shout out to Jamison Battle, who just signed a 3-year contract with the Toronto Raptors. So we got 11 players under contract for next season. And this brings the Raptors salary cap to $176 million. Again, we don't know the details of Jamison Battle's salary cap situation as well, but assuming he's probably getting paid at the very least $2-3 million, which we could add on to here. But since we don't know the details, we're going to leave the salary cap for the Toronto Raptors at $176 million. Now, $176 million, again, at the very least, we know Jamison Battle's making a couple $1 million. So the Raptors are close to $179 million realistically. And that gives the Raptors not much spending room because they'll have to get 4 more players under contract. And keeping in mind, a top 10 pick does make a decent amount of money for prospects as well. So it's not as if we are going to draft in the first round and we're getting someone for $2 million. This is probably going to be anywhere from $5 to $10 million, depending on the position we land in the draft pick. So adding that on, now we've got to cover about 3 more roster spots, and we're going to have to fill it out with approximately a few $1 million left. Now, I know people are going to say, well, those are 14, 13, 14, 15 spots anyways. So why does it matter? Well, keep in mind that the Raptors will be in the luxury tax, and considering the new CBA rules, you have seen this past trade deadline, the last several months, how difficult it is for a lot of teams to make trades because you can't add several players into a trade, right? So the Raptors are going to lock themselves into a position being in the luxury tax where they can't aggregate players in a trade because they're past the luxury tax. And also do keep in mind that once the Raptors get past the luxury tax, they're still going to have to pay other guys as well. So taking a look at the Raptors salary cap situation here for next season, you're going to have Jakob Poeltl, who is extension eligible this summer. You're going to have RJ Barrett, who's extension eligible this summer. And I know what people are going to say, trade RJ, but just look at what the Memphis Grizzlies had to do to get off of Marcus Smart's contract. And you could argue in terms of value, they're probably very close to each other. Marcus Smart, he hasn't had the career he wanted with the Memphis Grizzlies, but still, he is still a decent player that, needed a first round pick attached to him to get off of his contract just for the Memphis Grizzlies. So imagine RJ's contract, imagine Jakob Poeltl's contract, what their new contracts will look like. And again, just keeping in mind, we are eventually going to have to fast forward next season, following season as well. We're going to have to pay Ochai Agbaji. Grady Dick becomes extension eligible as well. And I know people are going to ask, who cares? That's 2 years from now. But do keep in mind, guys, do keep in mind, Brandon Ingram is 27 years old. He's become very injury prone throughout his career. And I'm hoping what Dyson Daniels said regarding the New Orleans Pelicans organization is true, because he said it is so weird being there because I was just injured all the time. So hopefully getting Brandon Ingram out of that situation is good. But just in terms of the Raptors ceiling now, it becomes so limited. It pretty much becomes a second round exit team, which is what the Raptors were a few seasons ago, where a lot of people said blow it up, rebuild. So we're going to be getting a high draft pick probably this off season when the draft comes around. But the following seasons, it becomes really complicated. So again, keeping in mind all of these things I had just mentioned, it seems like Masai Ujiri is making a move to win now for himself and for Scotty Barnes as well, because his contract is going to be up soon. So I'm very curious to hear what you think about this. I just think it handicaps the Raptors a lot moving forward. High risk, high reward. I understand it. But in terms of the Toronto Raptors, what if it doesn't work out? What if Brandon Ingram does not play well in the playoffs? I don't want to seem like I'm hating on Brandon Ingram. He's actually a really good player. I've liked him for several years now. He's one of my favorite players offensively, super talented. But take a look at his playoff numbers. He hasn't been good the last time around. And even in the play-in game, if you recall, it didn't look great as well. So you're going to be paying someone $43 million, and all of a sudden, if he performs the way he did, unfortunately, I just see a lot of fans turning on him. But I'm very curious to hear your thoughts about all of this together. Let me know your thoughts. I just don't think it's worth a gamble. Again, I understand where the Raptors are coming from. I just think it handicaps the Raptors a lot moving forward. But let me know your thoughts down below. And as always, I do have a trivia question for you today. So the trivia question for today is, before Brian Colangelo, who was the Raptors executive? Is it a Rob Babcock? Rest in peace to him. Is it Glenn Grunwald? Is it C, Jack Mikulski? Or is it D, Wayne Embry? So whoever answers this trivia question correctly first in the comment section gets a shout out in my next video. So that will be it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have yourselves a great day.